Thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. New year, new sketchbook, blank, crisp, new beautiful pages to start, but we don't know what to paint, right? I know the feeling. So today I'm here to share with you some ideas that are gonna either spark your own creativity so you can fill the rest of that sketchbook on your own, or that are gonna leave you deeply satisfied with your sketchbook practice today. Hi, I'm Paula. I'm a full-time artist. Welcome to my channel and let's get creative. Here's my brand new sketchbook and I can't even tell you how excited I am to break it in. This year, I'm going to start my sketchbook practice in the most joyful and satisfying way I can think of, which is using very watered down watercolors freely on my pages. I'm starting by using some blues and creating some loose leaf shapes. Like I said, I'm using super saturated watercolors because one of the things I enjoy the most is watching the pigments bleed and transform as they mix and then as they dry. I slowly start to fill my page with leaves, changing the direction and the colors I use as I go, letting the shapes touch so that the colors would bleed into each other. One thing I realized while I was in the process of painting my leaves was that I was basically using different shades of primary colors to create this composition. Just yellows, blues, and reds. But of course, as I let the colors mix together, I was getting pretty interesting shades of purple, orange, and green as well. I kept playing until I almost ran out of space to put more leaves in, and then I let the page to dry. Once it was dry, I added gold watercolor on top. Adding gold to my artwork is another practice that really makes me happy. While I was adding gold watercolor to all of the leaves, I thought about filling some of the spaces with smaller gold leaves, but I really didn't like how that looked, so I ended up grabbing my darkest blue and painting over that first little leaf. And then I painted a couple of more with both colors so the page would stay balanced. When the new leaves and the gold paint were dry, I brought in my favorite golden marker that I hadn't used in a while, and I started to draw more leaves on top, intersecting the ones that I already had on the page, but also using them to connect the negative spaces I had left. I had fun playing with the patterns of the leaves, making them all a bit different. We started simple with this page because again, what I want is for these ideas to be playful and satisfying so they get you in the right mood to fearlessly and joyfully start your sketchbook practice this year. Here's our first page. I absolutely love it, especially how the two types of gold paint reflect on the page as I tilt it. And because now I know we both love doing this, here's that first page mocked up as a large wall art in a beautiful room. I taped the border for our second page of the day, and for this one I'm gonna get even more playful by trying something I wanted to do, and I'm pretty sure they still do at kindergarten. I'm just gonna throw some yarn on my page. Okay, not exactly what they do in kindergarten because I'm pretty sure they soak the yarn with paint, but you know, still playful. I just randomly let it fall on the page, fidget with it a tad to get wider spaces, and then I simply grabbed one of my black pens and started outlining the contour of the string. Once I traced it all, of course, I removed it, and this is what I had left. I wasn't sure what to do with it, so again I decided to do something that brought me joy. So back to watery watercolors, but now in rainbow order, yay! This always makes me super happy and I find it to be super satisfying. Again, as the very wet colors blend onto the dry page when I put them side to side. I decided I wasn't gonna cover all of the page, but just go over this random shape that the string left. I even threw a little bit of gold at the end to see how it would react. When the watercolor dried, I decided I wanted all the lines to look better, less wonky, more regular, so I grabbed a paint marker and went over them. When I finished that, I followed my typical impulse of adding more lines, almost like repetition or rhythm around the page. I was truly just playing. No real plan, enjoying the juiciness of my marker and just adding lines where it felt right. I also outlined the whole page by drawing a line next to the washi tape margin, and then I thought I wanted to do more lines just to see what happened. When I felt I had my fill of drawing lines, I got a very satisfying tape pull, and this is our second page of the day. I actually like it a lot. At the beginning, I didn't think that I would, but now I do, so why not? Let's see it as a poster in a room as well. For the third idea, I actually drew inspiration from a lesson I took on Skillshare. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, Skillshare is kindly sponsoring this video, and if you haven't heard about them, it's the largest online learning community for creatives like you and me. They offer thousands of classes across many different creative categories like illustration, craft, DIY, marketing, business, photography, and that's just a few. They are constantly adding new class categories. The classes are led by industry professionals, and a thing I really like is that Skillshare has these learning paths, which are curated collections of classes that easily guide you through what you need to learn and in what order you need to see those classes to master any skill. Before starting this video, I thought I'd looked into their sketchbook lessons, and because I've never actually taken a watercolor class in my life, and I actually really love the medium, I was drawn to a class called Sketchbook Practice Back to Basics Watercolor Fundamentals by Omar Nguyen. And what I learned in it inspired me to create our next page. So if you're like me and you love picking up new hobbies or skills, you can get started right now, because the first 500 people to use the link in my description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. How fun is that? But back to our page. In the lesson, the teacher used different drying times to layer watercolors and get different effects. I thought I would try to see the difference by painting 3 trees. So you're gonna see that I painted the first half of the trees at the same time, but I will be painting each missing half at a different time, allowing the watercolor to dry differently. Not as evident with edited footage, but it did happen, I promise. I was trying to work more on the ground as I let time pass, but I have to admit, I'm not as patient as you probably need to be to have a real difference with this, and watching paint dry is definitely not one of my highs. So I probably rushed it more than the teacher did. You can see a little difference between the 3 trees. The only thing was, once I was done, I didn't like my composition. So instead of letting it dry completely, I added more water over everything. Because instead of having 3 lonely trees, I would have a little bit of the illusion of a forest, letting the canopies bleed into a larger mass. I really like this effect, so I added more paint and created my forest. Once it all dried, I wanted to play with some color pencils on top, so I started to draw on the trees, just adding more texture and color. I especially liked using the pencils to shade a bit and to bring in purple to the composition. I also used color pencils to create some lines on top of the ground, and for this area I mostly followed the lines that the watercolor left when it dried. I really think it was fun to incorporate the watercolor flowers as ground lines. Finished it by adding more pencil details with brown to the trunks of the trees, and after a very satisfying tape peel, here is our third page, a cute little painting that I think would also look charming in a tiny frame somewhere. Fourth idea, after taping an edge, I wanted to use the same techniques to create an abstract landscape. This is very much a regular happening in my art practice. I'm always painting abstract landscapes, so it felt right to make one today. I also got very impatient with the drying time, so I blotted a lot of the excess water and then went ahead and added more pigment on top. I'm playing with the gold paint again because I really enjoy that, and using my favorite color, which is Payne's Gray. I swear this is my go-to color in every medium. Also added a light wash of color to the sky because I really wanted to get that frame from the tape peel at the end. Once everything was completely dried, I came back with the same watercolors and a thin brush, and I started adding details. Just lines following the shapes of the dried pigments. Then I added even more color when that layer dried. It was because I was having so much fun. I was truly enjoying the process. This video was such a joy for me to create. So much so that immediately after I finished filming, I jumped to my other sketchbook to paint some more. I'll show you those pages at the end. For this page, I also wanted to create some textures, so I painted vertical lines on some of the areas. Here comes that satisfying tape peel, and of course, I really love this one. It is a true representation of my artwork and style. Really love it, and now because I've actually figured out how to offer prints of these pages for you, there will be a link in the description in case you want to get one. Moving on, I'm going to use the same colors as the opposite page because I like my pages matching when they're in the same spread. I wet the entire page before applying watercolor to it, and I'm just very randomly adding color because I want to try something I've never tried before. I'm going to put some bubble wrap on top of my page. When I was adding the pigment, I remembered that when I tried this with cling wrap plastic, the parts that worked better were the parts that had more pigment on it. So I went back and added a lot more color onto the page. Once I was happy with how saturated the page was, of course I put my bubble wrap on top and let it dry. A few minutes later, it was dry, or almost. I didn't want to wait anymore, so again, I blotted the tiny areas that were still wet. This is what I had as a result, and honestly, at first I panicked a little bit because the result gave me absolutely zero inspiration. I expected magic like I had with the plastic wrap. I'll link that video so you can see. But after staring at it a bit, I thought I would draw a circle in the middle to match the little circle prints left by the bubble wrap. So I drew a circle, but then realized it wasn't in the middle, so I wanted it to be in the middle. So I erased the first circle and drew a second one. With the outline of the circle drawn, my next impulse was to add some more pigment following the lines I had. So I created this diagonal thing. Then I decided to fill some of the negative space between the circle and the background with lines. This page was definitely the more intuitive of the day because I had absolutely no plan for it. I was just going from what I had on the page already, so I painted more lines and just played with it. I truly recommend processes like this where you add an unexpected element like I did with the bubble wrap, because not knowing what's gonna happen and losing a little bit of the control of the page will lead you to try stuff that you've never tried before. Just come to the page when you're connected with your playful self and be sure of not letting your inner critic have a say on what you're doing so you can discover new things. In this playful state, I also decided to use my very neglected white watercolor to paint around the circle, making it more apparent. I outlined some of the watercolor with a thinner brush because that's simply one of my favorite things to do and I keep coming back to it. And when all of that finally dried, I used a white acrylic marker to create more lines and more marks over my page. Remove the tape and here it is, a super abstract random composition I actually like. It's very different, but I think it works, especially when I see it next to my other one. I think it's really fun, so yeah, let's see it as a larger piece on a mocked up space. Next, I wanted to play more freely again, so I just started to randomly paint circles on my page, and because I love it so much and it's so much fun, I'm again using a gradient of bright colors. Left all of my fun circles to dry, and once they did, I thought it would be fun to do more mark making with that white paint marker I had out. So I went on top of some of the circles and created marks and textures on them. Once that was dry, I grabbed the black marker and I started to do some squiggly lines on top. At first, I thought I was going to do some neurographical art on it, but I just ended up doing a bunch of repetitive curved lines and just playing with the composition I already had on the page. Drew lines until it felt it was a good place to stop, and this is what I ended up with. I actually like it more on its side, and that would be the direction I would hang it in, so here is another mock-up showing you how I imagine that piece to look in an actual space. For the next page, of course, I'm using the same colors because, like I said, I like my spreads to match, but this time I'm adding a washi tape border. I again wanted to play the circles. This time I painted larger circles, trying to fill as much of my page as I could. Once I had the first 5 large circles on, I thought that large white space wasn't working, so I ended up painting the whole page, still keeping the circles visible with contrasting colors but letting them be overlapped by the new paint. Again, more blending to see what happened. This is how that dried. I used a white marker to draw a bunch of doodles on top, all over the page. A lot of mark making since my plan was to experiment with layering dry watercolor, and I wanted to stain the white by putting more colors on top. You'll see. So when the white lines dried, I came back to the same colors I initially used and started painting smaller circles on top. Really loving the results from the get-go. I think it's a very fun thing to experiment with. Once that second layer of circles dried, I brought the white marker back and did yet another layer of mark making. Not as intense as the first one, just adding some white in a few spaces. When I was happy with those details, I painted a third layer of circles on top. Used the same colors but made them darker for this final layer so they would really pop out. I am actually fascinated with this result and how the layering came to be. I really want to try to experiment with this more. It's such a fun page and I'm really interested in the look that I achieved. Before I forget, let me show you what I painted when I finished filming the video. I truly had so much fun I needed to carry on. So I used the same techniques I played with to create watercolor studies for future paintings. I will list some of these originals from my large sketchbook on my Sachi profile, which will also be linked in the description of the video, along with a separate link through which you can purchase prints. And just to let you know, my paper originals do ship frame with gallery grade glass ready to hang. Okay, that's everything we painted today. Such great ideas to start a sketchbook. Do not forget to let me know which was your favorite so I could maybe make a print out of that one too. I hope you enjoyed this video and that I will see you next Friday with a brand new one. Have the most wonderful day. Bye!